Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back for another episode of Daily Palantir. It is November 13th, 2023. Happy Monday. We've got a lot to discuss around Palantir today. Number one, we're going to be talking about price action on Friday. We went up 7%, $19 range, still in that $19 range. So I want to talk about what's going on with the stock and the price action around the stock. Number two, something that got missed from last week, which was a new Time magazine article around Palantir's role in Ukraine. I want to talk about that, what that Time article talked about in regards to their role in Ukraine and where potentially some more government deals could be coming in for Palantir. Number three, Benzinga put out an alert today around the NHS deal, which is one of the reasons that's influencing Palantir's price to continue to possibly be at this $19 level. A lot of fund managers are watching out for this NHS deal announcement. And then finally, we got an article by Reuters that broke just 30 minutes ago saying that the valuation for Palantir is a little bit too high. I want to discuss their forward PE in comparison to some other companies and discuss a little bit more around this price and how I think about valuation. Got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. All right, first thing to talk about is the price action, of course. And here we go, folks. $19.65. I think we hit a high today of around $19.88. Basically holding its momentum from Friday. Friday, we went all the way from $18.20 to $19.70. And so we're at $19.65, 5 cents down from where we were on Friday. Price action obviously doing very well. And later in the episode, we're going to talk more about valuation and go a little bit more deeper in terms of some of the metrics that a $19 price is implying. One of the things that we talked about on the weekly podcast is that an $18 price is implying a 30% CAGR for the next 4 years if you do a sort of traditional analysis and try to do the numbers via DCF. So $19 is implying a little bit more than 30% CAGR right now. And obviously that is a rich premium, one could argue, if you're using a traditional DCF. But then you also have to bring into account the fact that there is a lot of money to be won for Palantir that we're going to talk about later in this episode. And will Palantir win it? I don't know, but at least the market is of the perception via this stock price that Palantir's earnings were really good and Palantir is up to win a lot of contracts in the future, implying that the valuation is justified. So nonetheless, $19.63. The 10-year went up a little today at 4.6. Overall, market has been relatively flat. S&P 500 at 440. It touched 438 today. Was a little bit below that, 437 now at 440. Google, Microsoft, all these guys are down today, but down very slightly. I mean, Apple was at 185. Now it's at 184.90. Meta actually hit a 52-week high today. So Meta was one of the big techs that ends up doing very well. $330, $329.89 right now. Overall, markets were relatively, some stocks were green, some stocks were red. S&P was pretty much flat. NASDAQ was pretty much flat. Palantir held that $19 level, and it's doing a good job staying at 19. I mean, there's nothing else to say. It's doing its thing. Okay, we'll talk more about the valuation a little bit later on the show. Let's talk about some more qualitative stuff, which is an article that I think a lot of us missed last week. Palantir actually tweeted this article, but I guess there was so much news we didn't have time to really look into it. Ukraine is using AI to help clear millions of Russian landmines. This is from Time magazine, and this is a little bit more deeper in terms of the investigative journalism they're doing around Ukraine, and specifically not just using AI for operational warfare, but more specifically operational warfare in the context of Russian landmines. For those that don't know what a landmine is essentially a bomb, right? So when you're walking in a warfield, you may be walking and out of nowhere you step into a landmine, and it's an explosive weapon concealed under or camouflaged on the ground and designed to destroy or disable enemy targets. Usually ends up being some type of a bomb. You step into it and then boom, you can die. So this article goes a lot more deeper into the software that's being used to track these landmines and what's going on. And none other did the article focus on than Palantir. Palantir was a focus of 2 Time magazine articles back in July. One was how Ukraine is using AI for the war. And that was a focus piece on Palantir. And second was Alex Karp was named one of Time magazine's most 100 influential people in AI. So Time has been giving Palantir some really interesting coverage, and they do really deep investigative journalism. They're not just like sensational type of articles. They actually kind of go deeper into that stuff. And so here's some of the stuff they had to say about Palantir. Quote from the article: Palantir, which has been working with Ukraine's government since June 2022, signed a series of agreements in May to provide its data analytics software to various Ukraine agencies. They worked together to develop a platform that combined data from government agencies, including the Ministries of Education, Defense, Agriculture, Energy, Infrastructure, with information like cell phone data from Ukrainian mobile operators, which can reveal how many people are actually living in an area using certain roads. So So far, the platform has integrated 82 datasets, according to Palantir, and connected 6 million buildings, 60,000 train segments, and 1 million road segments. A demo time view depicts the data in color-coded layers. Transmission lines are shown in colors ranging from blue to red, depending on their voltage. Another filter shows whether the territory is occupied or liberated, and others note the locations of nearby power plants or a school. Satellite imagery can show whether the land is in use or if there have been many recent explosions, and a dashboard tallies the number of fatalities, the confirmed and suspected hazards, the number of buildings affected, and the square meters of the hazardous area. I'm going to link the article in the chat, in the description, so people can check it out. But that is something that it's new data that I think Palantir disclosed the time for the first time. 6 million buildings, 60,000 train segments, 1 million road segments, and then later it talks about all the different things they're able to decide via this kind of color-coded database around how many fatalities there are if a piece of land is occupied or liberated. I mean, just incredibly interesting things that's going on with Palantir. A couple other quotes that I think are really important. Ishra Urtza, an engineer working on the project at Palantir's London's office, says, usually we'd be talking decades, if not centuries, to demine in a conventional way, which is to get rid of the landmines in an area. The ability to take this cohesive picture of what's actually happening on the ground is so central to their ability to reduce that number. The platform uses Palantir's AIP, a platform that connects large language models to datasets, a kind of virtual assistants in the style of ChatGPT to provide real-time data, automatically provide officials with the best options, schedule demining requests, customize alerts, etc. In theory, this allows officials to prioritize clearing mines that will impact the most people or have the biggest economic effect, meaning people don't die, which is important. It means that everybody's making decisions based on their full remit of information rather than some very aggregated number that someone's made up from some model in an Excel sheet from 5 years ago. I think this is what the market is also seeing in the context of Palantir's AIP really being a platform for a lot of people. Microsoft unveiled, or OpenAI unveiled, custom GPTs last week. And, I think that's why Microsoft got to all-time highs, because a lot of the market is like, oh, what if these custom GPTs become really big? Custom GPT is basically taking ChatGPT, training it on your own data, and then that becomes distributed and anyone can use that. So like a tax advice lawyer, a doctor, a chef, they can make their own version of ChatGPT right now in a custom GPT via OpenAI store. The problem is a lot of that is consumer focused, consumer oriented, and maybe it'll become very big. Maybe it'll be like an Apple iOS store. I have some doubts on that, but we'll see what it becomes. The enterprise is where all the money is at. And I'm not saying that OpenAI is not going to try to go after the enterprise, but I think the differentiating variable we're seeing with AIP is that enterprises, an entire country, right, in Ukraine that's trying to rebuild and trying to make sure they protect their sovereignty, is finding trust, confidentiality, and security with using Palantir's AIP, connecting their data sets to large language models. And remember, one of the things Sham talked about in AIPCon was the concept of KLLMs. KLLMs is this idea that you don't have to just use one LLM to give you an answer, but you can use several LLMs and then synthesize all of those to be able to give you an answer. We saw Daniel Weston, the founder of the European Cricket Network, which is a Foundry for Builders company that partnered with Palantir, tweeted publicly that, hey, the first 4 answers sucked when I was using AIP. The 5th one was really amazing because we're using this kind of KLLM approach to be able to deliver and get answers. So I think this Ukraine article was just really important because it shows the depth of data that Palantir is condensing, which is millions and millions of data sets, to be able to actually deliver real-time information in a meaningful way to Ukraine. Again, satellite imagery analysis, mapping and visualization, economic impact assessment, real-time information, data integration, automated decision support, customized alerts, enhanced community engagement, resource optimization, internal collaboration. They're doing a lot of stuff in the context of AIP. Now, from a business perspective, what does this mean? We still have zero idea how much money Palantir is getting from Ukraine, if they've signed a deal to actually monetize what they're doing in Ukraine, because Karp has said many times that we gave them the software for free, and we all know what that means. That means it's a trial. You can use it, and we're not going to charge you anything now, but we expect to get some of this money a little bit later. The United States has sent Ukraine well over $100 billion, and I think we're getting ready to send them some more money. If that's the case, some of that money is going to be allocated to Palantir. I think it's very obvious some of that money is going to be allocated to Palantir. And the question simply becomes how much of that's going to be allocated, when that's going to be allocated. It seems like from this article, Palantir is not doing a small amount of work, and maybe the software was free in the first months of the war, but they have integrated themselves so deeply with the ministries of defense, education, digital transformation, etc., that we've got to believe there is some contract that is there that is either already been monetized and Palantir is showing it in their numbers, but we don't know because we don't know exactly how much money they're getting, or that money is coming in the future. And when that money does come, you never know when, one of the quarterly reports shows this increase in growth and where did that come from? And it ends up being that it came from Ukraine. So we will ultimately see what happens in the context of Ukraine revenue. But from this Time article, again, it'll be in the description. Palantir is doing a hell of a job in Ukraine. Okay, quick thing I want to talk about, and then we'll move on to valuation stuff. This is going to be a really quick segment. Benzinga. So Palantir Chat tweeted this out today. Benzinga put out an alert. Watching Palantir Technologies, hearing unconfirmed rumor, company awarded $600 million federated data platform from NHS England, being cited by Morgan Stanley desk, being signed off by ministers, and will be publicly announced within a matter of days. So this comes from the Morgan Stanley desk. Benzinga reported it. It seems like we're getting this contract. And when we do get the contract, it'll be very fun to make the video saying, yeah, we got the contract. But I think the reason the stock ran 7% last Friday is literally because the toots got notice of this Morgan Stanley report that's being reported today. I think people got notice that we're getting the contract. We looked at the article from Digital Health, which is one of the largest publications in the UK that covers the healthcare space and covers the NHS, that said the deal is going to be announced imminently. Palantir got the deal, and now we're just waiting for the official word. So I think we have the deal. I think it has been announced. I think the stock, the premium that we were, all of us were guessing, that's not even baked into the stock yet. I think that it's baked into the stock. As of today, looking at Palantir, $19.65. When it was at $18.30, you could say the premium wasn't baked in. That was purely off of earnings. I think 1830 to 1960, there is a lot of momentum around the stock because that we got this deal. And so I think that 7% run up on Friday, that was really because people knew that the NHS deal was coming and institutions got aware of that, and then retail piled on, and so it compounded, and now we're stuck at this kind of 1960 level, and we'll see where it goes from there. But it looks like we're getting the deal, and now it's just a question of a waiting game to see when they announce it. All right, let's talk about valuation. So this is an article that broke just 30 minutes before I started recording this from Reuters. And the title is Palantir's Mythology is Far Too Precious, kind of making a play on words here with Lord of the Rings. They got a new cart picture. I don't even know how they got this cart picture, but they got this cart picture. So let's read a little bit of it and see what they have to say, and then I want to talk about valuation. Palantir has cultivated a powerful mythos worthy of being named for a crystal ball from Lord of the Rings, blah, blah, blah. They talk about all that. Demand is quickly rising for software using AI that can make sense of volumes and disparate amounts of data. Yet Palantir's top line is only expected to grow 16% this year. And other companies like Databricks, which we've talked about many times on the channel, is growing 3 times quicker now at the same valuation as Palantir. Databricks is about $43 billion. Palantir is basically $43 billion right now, $42 billion. Databricks growing closer to that 50% range, Palantir at 16%. With an enterprise value of some $40 billion after tripling of its stock this year, Palantir trades at 14 times the revenue analysts anticipated over the next 12 months. Snowflake, whose sales are expected to increase 50% faster, is valued at the same multiple. Microsoft garners a 30% discount despite its AI progress, and that it's expected to grow only slightly slower than Palantir. Moreover, both Snowflake and Microsoft have been turning revenue into free cash flow. There's also a risk that Palantir's ability to secure government contracts, which account for more than half of its top line, will be restrained by its politics. Corporate clients took more promising but wrangling insights from data isn't a one-size-all-fits proposition, and the bespoke attention only eats the profits. Although Palantir has doubled the amount of revenue generated per employee over 5 years, slower growth has also led to higher operating margins. Then he says the company's odd choice about capital allocation also warrants a discount. For example, Palantir bought $50 million of gold bars in 2021 to prepare for unpredictable black swan events. It then sold the metal this year for about the same price. I don't know why that's a reason to have a bear case against Palantir. Also sitting on Palantir's balance sheet are stakes in targets of special purpose acquisition companies. It invested more than $450 million into Babylon Health, Rubicon, and others, but most have lost their value while some went bankrupt. It doesn't take a wizard to see that in many eyes of investors, Palantir is far too precious. So a couple of things here. Number one, the SPAC thing, the guy didn't do his research. We're up on the SPACs. We're up 12.5% on the total money we invested in SPACs because we did a ton of strategic deals, a ton of bartering, sold off a ton of stuff, got a lot more grants. So if you look at some of the data, and we covered this on the channel, I think a couple months ago, we are up on the SPACs, so the SPACs aren't that big of a deal. If the purpose of him bringing up the SPACs is that we make weird capital allocation decisions, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I would just say, that is the nature of a company that's trying to take risks and be different in the market. That $450 million, they could have used it in other ways, sure, but the reason they want their software to be on the front lines of all these different emerging industries, all these new innovative tech startups, you're going to have to take some risks, and that's what you do when you invest in SPACs. And so that story and that narrative is kind of gone. Even if we didn't do that, I don't think it would have necessarily affected. The stock's up 200% this year. It's like SPACs are not that big of a deal. The broader question I care about, which is what he's talking about, is this idea of forward valuation in the context of growth, right? So the argument that the person who wrote this article is making, I believe his name is Ryan, is that Snowflake is growing 50% faster. Microsoft is growing pretty much just the same, but the PE of Snowflake is the same. Microsoft's PE is a little bit lower than Palantir, and Palantir's growth is not enough to justify the valuation. This is a Seeking Alpha article that I wanted to show as well that I was reading last night in the context of Palantir. To give a little bit more analysis, Palantir stock premium exceeds generative AI SaaS peers such as NVIDIA. NVIDIA's at a 42x PE, forward PE, CrowdStrike's at 68, and Microsoft's at 32. Palantir's forward PE is 74 compared to its 1-year mean of 54. So we're about 20 points above our 1-year mean in terms of how we trade in forward PE. And the sector median is 21. So our forward PE for Palantir is 74. We usually trade at a 54 PE, so obviously there's a premium there. And the sector median of general SaaS, generative AI companies is around 21. NVIDIA is cheaper than Palantir, CrowdStrike's cheaper than Palantir, and Microsoft's cheaper than Palantir when you look at forward PE. What is my take on all this? I think there's two things to discuss here, right, when it comes to this question about valuation. I was actually speaking to a fund manager based in Texas today, and I was getting his thoughts on where he believes the valuation is. He got into Palantir at $7-8. And his argument to me was very simple. He's not that concerned about it because these stocks are always going to be expensive. Now, does that mean you pile in a 1965, 1940, $19? I personally don't think so. I like price targets for me on Palantir at 15 or below. That's where I really get excited. Maybe 16, 15 or below is where I like my buy. That's always been my historical buy range. I don't really like buying at 19 or at these prices. And really, I don't like buying here because the stocks run up so much in the past 3 weeks. You got to give it a little time to cool down. Could it run up more? Sure. But also you got to be realistic here, right? At some level, the stock can go down. Not everything goes up. And when it runs up that much, it's like Tesla at $299 after earnings. When it's run up that much, you want to just chill for a second and be a little bit patient here. In the broad scheme of things, yes, the forward PE of Palantir is implying more than 30% year-over-year growth. It's implying better growth than companies like NVIDIA, CrowdStrike, and Microsoft. And it's implying growth that will probably increase to be able to justify already the baked-in premium in order for this price to go from $19 to something higher. So on a pure valuation perspective, you can argue that the stock is expensive in comparison to some of its peers. However, the two arguments I have kind of against that, giving the other perspective here, is that Datadog is up 30%, Snowflake is up 11%. These SaaS companies are getting a little bit more of a premium by the market because the entire market is getting more friendlier to some of these SaaS names. Again, that doesn't mean you pile into Palantir at these prices. It just means it's for people to understand at a broader level why some of those other companies are going up, why their stock prices are going up, why their earnings were good enough for investors to be excited for the general field, and why Palantir, as a derivative of those companies, we got NVIDIA earnings on November 21st. If NVIDIA blows it out of the park, you never know. Palantir might go even higher simply because of the fact that NVIDIA means there's a ton of GPU demand. A ton of GPU demand means there's a ton of models being trained. A ton of models being trained means there's a ton of AI software being garnered and procured. And Palantir is in the middle. It is in the eye of the tornado when it comes to AI software spend. So there are tons of catalysts in S&P 500, GAAP profitability, NHS. I mean, there's just so much stuff we could talk about, right? But at its very core, I think the market is seeing, the point I'm trying to make here is that if AI and the broader sector around SaaS is really starting to gain momentum, then Palantir is one of those companies that even if it's overvalued, even if it's in that world of little pricey, it's probably always going to be pricey, but you're buying something that actually can expand. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that if the market is expanding, the total addressable market, along with the market spend in regards to enterprises that want to allocate capital to AI for their enterprise, then Palantir is going to be one of those names and a handful of names that's going to be discussed when it comes to those companies that have to make decisions. You never know if they don't like Microsoft's OpenAI, they don't like ChatGPT for the enterprise. They actually want something more secure like AIP, and then AIP really starts growing. You have no idea where this can go, and that's why I think when it comes to the valuation on a actual forward PE basis, is it more expensive than other companies? Yes. Does it deserve a little bit of the premium? I would say so, given everything we're seeing that's going on in the market right now. Another thing I wanted to bring up in regards to valuation is government contracts. So one of the point the article makes is that we don't know if Palantir's politics are going to be able to land it the same government contracts that it needs to be able to continue to show growth. I did an interview on Saturday with a guy named Adam who runs a Twitter account called Palantir's Palantir. I'll link the video in the description. I highly recommend people spend an hour of their day and listen to it, because that video, Adam is I would call him an expert in terms of really researching the government contracts Palantir is going after. The government contracts, and I talked to some people that work in the defense sector, there's a lot of money in regards to AI, the Space Force, Army Vantage, military deals, AI, ML research. There is a lot. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars that the government is getting ready to spend over the next 10 years to be able to modernize the entire DoD, Army, etc. Palantir is not going to win all of that money, but Palantir is in the running. It's one of, again, those handful of companies that is going to have to win some of it because there's just not that many other companies that can do the job that Palantir is doing. As a result of that, I think, and this was the conclusion of that video, there is a world where it's a random Tuesday in March 2024 and Palantir gets like $1 billion contract from the government. There is a world where that happens because the government is allocating a crap ton of money. Now, the political administration, Biden, Trump, all that, you get into a lot of different, so like you can't base an investment thesis off that, but it is something to understand in regards to this overvaluation argument of Palantir being too expensive. Well, if they can get a lot of government contracts soon or just randomly, and that makes up for like 3 years of depressed growth because one contract sums up all of it, and then that one contract carries on into the next 4 or 5 years, you just never know how to fully articulate a valuation for Palantir that is purely based on forward PE or price to sales. Because if you look at those two metrics, you can say, yeah, $19 is way too much to pay. If you step back a little bit and look at the long-term macro of what's going on with Palantir, you could probably see that there's a lot of catalysts coming up in the future, and that there's a lot of different ways in which the stock can go up. Now, again, I will be definitive here. Please do not take this as financial advice. I do not want anyone to go balls deep at $19 because the stock is up a lot, not only this year, it's up 200% year to date, but in the past month. And so it's just never a good idea to just pile more in when it's gone up that much. Like, sorry, if you're not in, you missed the run. Like, it is what it is. Don't chase. Wait for a better entry point. Wait, we don't even know if there's going to be a recession in 2024. You really got to be careful with this stuff because when you chase on the run up, there are people selling you their shares that they bought at $8 and they're profiting off you because you wanted to chase. And so you have to be very careful here. But to have a holistic view of valuation, it might be overvalued in the context of forward PE, price to sales, etc. Government contracts, GAAP profitability, S&P inclusion, AI peak growth, AI spend increasing dramatically across the enterprise, and then its peers going up in terms of their valuation because the entire market is giving them a premium. All of that hedges back against the overvalued narrative, or it at least creates a fair valuation narrative around Palantir. I would not be shocked if Palantir goes down to $14 in the next month. I would also not be shocked if it goes up to $25 in the next month. And that's the company we're dealing with. That's the company that has a million things surrounding it. That's the company that we all love and care about. And that's the stock that we're going to be covering for the next however long I do this, probably the rest of my life, seeing, what happens with Palantir. It's such a complicated company to understand. It's such a complicated stock to understand. There's so many different factors that go into trying to come up with a realistic understanding of valuation. But nonetheless, it is at that level where either you're like, I want to nibble at it a little bit and see and take a little risk if it goes to 25, or you want to be a little bit more patient and see if it comes down a little bit. Ultimately, it's up to you, but this is the information I wanted to present in terms of the bear case and the bull case hedging against each other. And that's what makes a market, to create ultimately a valuation for a company. All right, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Daily Palantir. Let's take one last look at the stock, 405. As I'm recording this, and the stock is here at $19.70 after hours. Not bad at all. Palantir holding up to $19. Let's see. Maybe we can potentially get to that $20 range. Who knows? We'll see if it happens. But so far, not doing too bad in the $19 range for Palantir. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching. I'll see you on the next episode.